Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I'm your host, Jerrad Wyche. It is episode 209. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
Jerrad, I wish you would tell me why the PlayStation 5 is so darn big.
Oh, nice. I see what you did there. Yeah, so this week we're going to be talking about the PlayStation 5 Teardown that came out of nowhere, really. We're going to be talking about Tell Me Why Chapter 3, the conclusion of our video game book club, our first ever one, and some smaller news. I mean, in reality, it was a pretty slow news week. We're probably going to get through the bulk of the video game news itself, including the PlayStation 5 stuff, rather quickly, and then we'll be talking about Tell Me Why, the conclusion of that game. Yeah, it's bittersweet. Obviously, we'll talk about pacing and whether or not we liked it being 3 chapters and the narrative in general and all that good stuff, but we got some other news to get to. First up, I thought this was pretty cool. I know neither of us are Mortal Kombat 11 players, but they announced the Kombat Pack 2, which is going to be adding Rambo, Rain, and Mileena. So Mileena and Rain are two characters that people have wanted for a while to be in the game. A lot of people were mad that Rain just wasn't in the base game itself. And adding Rambo kind of goes in line with them adding RoboCop and all of these other 80s characters, Terminator. The funny thing is, the Rambo character in Mortal Kombat 11 is going to be voiced by Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, do it right.
Yeah. Out of all of the colorful ninjas in Mortal Kombat, Rain's actually my favorite. He's the purple one. He's really cool. Obviously, it's a homage to Prince, because it's, purple Rain. Rain is purple. And then obviously a lot of people like Mileena too, out of all of the princess characters. That's pretty much it. Like I said, neither of us are big Mortal Kombat people, but the Kombat Pack 2 coming out, they also had the breakdown of how you can get your next gen upgrade, and the announcement of the Ultimate Edition, which kind of includes all of the DLC. It's a little confusing because they just word it all in a single message, but basically the way it works is if you have the regular Mortal Kombat 11, you can upgrade via purchasing one of the DLC packs, and then obviously you can upgrade to the next gen version of that. If you don't have any of those, you can buy the season pass, essentially, that includes all of the DLC. That'll upgrade you to the Ultimate Edition, or you can just buy the Ultimate Edition on next gen as well. So if you want to read into that more, if you care, look into that as well. But it's confusing based on how they word it. When you lay it all out, it's actually not too confusing. Next up, in Deborah Wilson news. If you're not familiar with Deborah Wilson, the reason I'm including this specifically is because she's one of our favorite, now prolific video game voice actresses. She was in, obviously, Star Wars Fallen Order. She was in Wolfenstein, and she was in Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Hey, click. I'm like, who is this again? And then as soon as you said Fallen Order, I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
She's known for older people as one of the main cast members of Mad TV, which is a sketch comedy show similar to SNL. Yeah, fantastic actress. She's making waves now in the video game industry, and I thought it was cool that she was announced today to be in a new video game, and that video game is Bugnax. Yes, you heard that right. She's going to be voicing a character named Shelda Smellywag, which is I think their Crocodile Hunter-esque type character in the game. They announced the entire voice cast, which is really cool. It also includes Peter Parker, which we talked about last week from Marvel Spider-Man, aka Yuri Lowenthal. And they also announced that the game is confirmed to be a launch title. Up until this point, we didn't know if it was actually launching alongside the PlayStation 5. It is now confirmed. It is coming out November 12th on PS5 and PS4, Dom. So, as someone, like I've mentioned before, because Miles is coming out on the PS4, I might jump into this as well, because early previews are saying this is, they said it was influenced by Pokemon Snap and Pokemon in general. And it seems a lot of the gameplay elements are that. You're going out and trying to catch specific bug snacks, doing certain things, trying to find out when special colors or versions of them pop out, right? So it's like catching Pokemon. You're taking pictures of them. But it has that weird, mysterious, dark undertone of what's really going on here. Is this all a facade? Is this the Truman Show, right? So I'm really interested to see how that goes. I don't remember what the price is. I'm pretty sure this is a $40 title, right? A budget
I think it's
title.
cheap. I know I saw on Epic Game Store it was $20, but things are usually cheaper on that store, so it's still 30 or 40 seems realistic.
Yeah, I might end up actually picking this up because it's coming to PS4 or maybe PC as well, because it's piqued my interest with the earlier previews. But yeah, good stuff with Deborah Wilson. We'll likely, obviously, spoilers, but we'll likely see her in the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, we assume anyways, who knows. And I mean, she's been in 3 AAA titles. I could assume that we're going to see her in a lot more. My dream, Dom, is I hope she's one of the main partners or companions in Dragon Age 4. That'd be really cool because there is that working relationship with EA now, right? So that'd be really dope. But yeah, Deborah Wilson's awesome. I'm glad that she's, we're used to the Troy Bakers, Nolan Norths, Laura Baileys, and they're phenomenal actors and actresses themselves. But I like now that we're seeing other people get this track record. And like I said, she's been known since before voice acting in video games. But it's really cool to see her because she does such a good job. Let's get into this PlayStation 5 Teardown. So, PlayStation, kind of out of nowhere, released an official teardown video of the PlayStation 5, and in it, we learned quite a bit. Here's what we found out about the next-gen console, so I'm going to go through these things, and we can talk about them as slowly or as quickly as possible, Dom. So first up, we got the official measurements of the console, and for me, the most interesting one out of all of them is the height. We've been wondering, how big is this thing? You see it next to this guy that's going to be tearing it down, and it's a huge console. It's a chonker.
That guy might be a small man, maybe, but even still, that thing is the size of his torso, like waist to shoulders. That's how big this thing is. And
exactly.
It looks like because we're finally seeing it like in the context like of a person, right, or someone putting their hands on it for the first time, as far as I can think. And it is just like, it looks really big. It's kind of funny looking.
Official measurements, it's 15 inches tall. And to put that into perspective, the Xbox Series X is around 10.5 inches tall. Obviously, it's a different shape completely. But in terms of just pure height, 15 inches, that's obviously more than a foot by 3 inches. Big boy. Even by volume, the PlayStation actually is larger than the Xbox Series X as well, which you might not assume because the Xbox Series X is shorter and fatter, right? And the PlayStation is a lot taller and it looks slimmer, but because it's so tall and so deep, it actually has a lot more volume to it. It is a big boy. Other than that, we're wondering, okay, this is big because it needs to have air vents. It needs to cool down the system. These systems are going to be pushing out a lot of power. The system's going to get hot. It needs to be cooled properly. And on top of a giant heatsink, which takes up like almost half of the console, which is not surprising for, PlayStation wanting to over-engineer because of the loud fans and everything going on with the PS4 Pro. They have a liquid metal thermal cooling solution. So instead of going with pure thermal paste, which we've known companies to go for a while, they went with liquid metal cooling, right? And the thing with this is it provides stellar performance in terms of cooling, actually better than regular thermal paste, but it's a big risk, right? It's high risk, high reward. Because if any of this, even a drop, even a minuscule nothing, touches any other part of the system, it'll fry it almost instantaneously. So when you see this, not only is it liquid cooled, there is a reservoir around it to try to catch any spillage that might happen, on top of the spongy outer lining that's pretty thick actually, that is put there in place to hold everything in. And that's the interesting thing is we haven't seen this before in a console. It's very innovative. They spent a lot of time figuring out the solution for this because, like I said, if liquid metal touches anything else, it's very dangerous. And something we were talking about off podcast on when this first came out is you had mentioned like, well, yeah, this is one of the things with the PS4 Pro or PS4, people were just replacing the thermal paste to get better performance, right? Now with this isn't something that your Joe Schmo could do. Like you can't just apply liquid cooling, liquid metal cooling. What do you think about this in terms of if there is problems moving forward, it can't be a consumer fix as easily if they were just to use thermal paste?
Yeah, and even I never even wanted to do the thermal paste stuff. Like, even that is like really tricky and complicated to redo, right, in the PS4. So this is something like a person probably, or a regular person could never, I don't know. It sounds like when they presented it and they talk about it, it sounds really cool and really high tech, like really fancy, and like liquid metal, like that sounds badass, right? Like even if you don't know what it is, I guess. But when like you did a little bit of research into it, and it's like it's cool and it performs well, but like potentially like if there's a problem, it's a big problem, right? So hopefully, they buttoned all their somethings. I don't know, crossed their T's.
Crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's.
Yeah, like they really tested this out, and as well as possible. So,
and Xbox is going for vapor chamber cooling, right? It's a different, they kind of get to the same place but differently. And the problem with both of them, or potential problem with both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, is we can sit here and think like these are giant corporations that spend so much money in R&D figuring out solutions to make these consoles work. But the problem is you don't know on a grand scale until the consoles actually release, right? When they're in millions of homes getting played for millions of hours, how exactly things are going to shape out. And the thing too is both of these companies, one way more so in my opinion than the other, is in a place now where they need to over-engineer these things and they need to fix things because of past mistakes. I'm talking about Xbox, right? The Red Ring of Death was terrible. I think they have that as a kind of a red X on their record in terms of being a console manufacturer. And I think they have done a good job of over-engineering their stuff to never have that problem again. So my assumption is we shouldn't have to worry about that. And then on PlayStation side, I don't think it's as egregious of a mistake, but we've heard about the loud jet engine sounds of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. And I think the whole reason why their console is huge is the over-engineering to make sure it is cooled properly, right? I don't think we'll see any crazy problems with it. But in terms of specifically cooling, I think PlayStation's has a higher chance of failure because of how bad it can be. Whereas if Xbox's heating solution isn't as great, it won't be as catastrophic on the system. You know what I mean? But we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully it's fine. Yeah, like you said, we assume and kind of hope and like give them the benefit of the doubt at this point. Like they're veterans of this shit. Even though this is incredibly complicated, like you're putting a crazy powerful PC in what is still, a pretty compact box. If you go to build a PC and like ask for tips and stuff, and like you're building it in a big tower with lots of space, a lot of like, open space in those things, just because that's just the easiest way to do it with the least amount of risk for failure, right? But for consoles, it's like, it's a whole different ball game. And like you said, once there's millions and millions of them out there, like things can happen and they don't necessarily get treated well. Like maybe people who live in hotter areas or things like that, or like humid or whatever, there's a lot of variables that once these things are out there, anything can happen. They really need to be like designed with the intention of just absolute like reliability. But hopefully that's the case and these things are good to go.
Yeah, let's talk about something that's really cool and has a lot of potential if Sony takes advantage of it. And that's those removable flaps. In this teardown, we saw him pop those bad boys off like they were nothing, right? And it made people gather these thoughts of, man, not only could this be cool if Sony does custom consoles or custom panels you can buy and then pop on, right? This is going to be really cool for the modding community. These third-party retailers or sellers or individual artists on maybe Etsy or eBay or something, right? That you can commission and you can get these custom art pieces or art panels for your PlayStation 5. Or you can, if PlayStation doesn't do black ones, you can just do like a matte finish on these bad boys if you know how to spray paint or, paint on this type of material. It opens up a lot of stuff with that. What did you think when you saw how easily these things were able to be popped off and the possibilities of customization both from Sony and third party?
Same thing you just said. Like I'm still not like in love with the design of this thing with the white. Yeah. It's still it hasn't grown on me like I hoped it would yet. Hopefully when I get it, it will start to. Compared to like the Series X, like at first I thought it was like weird and ugly, and that thing grew on me a lot. Now I really like the look of it. But yeah, I'm not in love yet with the white flaps, so I'm ready to put some black flaps on that thing. This just sounds funny.
Let it fly.
Yeah, it'll just look so much cooler to me. I hope that that's not something. And I just thought of this now because we were talking about the SSD we'll get to later, but hopefully like putting on custom flaps doesn't like void your warranty or anything weird like that. I could kind of see that as something Sony might get pissy about, especially if it was custom painted. Like, oh, well, it got hot in the paint, some weird shit like that. I'm just kind of worried about that now, and maybe that's not a big concern. But yeah, I'm excited for the
If you're a smart consumer,
possibility.
you could just keep like the standard pair, right? And then when you talk to them, you'd be like, yeah, it stopped working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? It's really cool though, and there's a lot of possibility there, and I hope that people take advantage of that, whether Sony or these third-party artists, because it's just another avenue for artists to work with consumers in a really cool way. Next up, this is something that me, you, and often guest of the show, Chris Nunes, got into a little conversation about on Discord, Dom, when this teardown came out, which was the expandable storage, right? So on the PlayStation, it's internal, which is surprising to me. I don't know if it's surprising to you. I always assumed that their solution was going to be the same as the Xbox in terms of it being a memory card in the back. And I don't know why I had that assumption. I just thought, well, okay, Xbox is doing this. PlayStation, they announced the expandable storage and how they're going to be working with specific retailers to approve ones, right? And in my mind, I was like, okay, they're doing a memory card solution too, but that's not the case. And the conversation we had is I presented the idea that I just think that Xbox's solution is way easier, which I don't know how you can. That's not necessarily what you were arguing or Chris, because it's slotting a memory card in the back. But for me, I felt that it was just an unnecessary step Sony's making consumers do, and I don't know if the average consumer is gonna want to do that, right? And then obviously you and Chris talked about, well, we've done it, it's not that difficult. But then we also had a discussion of, well, are we the average consumer? Probably not. Would people do it? You can Google YouTube videos to figure it out. Yeah, I just want to know where you stand on that after we've both had some time to think about it. What are your opinions on them committing again to internal storage in terms of expansion?
So I'm glad what you mentioned first about what you thought it was going to be, because ever since the Cerny thing months ago, I already had the assumption that this is what it was going to be, and then especially after seeing the console, because they said this is going to work with the standard NMV, whatever it is, the same SSDs that you could slot into a motherboard on a computer. So that, to me, I was like, oh, well, it's going to be
not
underneath.
Standard. They had to be specifically approved by Sony because they had to reach a certain speed threshold.
Yeah, standard in size or format, it could fit on a motherboard.
Yeah,
most motherboards.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by standard, right? And not a nice, easy, usable memory card like Xbox did, which it's a way more elegant solution to be able to just slide that thing in the back of the console. But yeah, and then but I knew that's how it was going to be. And then once we saw the design of the PS5, I was like, and then once you see the back of it, it's like, oh yeah, it's going to have to be something where you're unscrewing the whole top piece of this or something. I knew that for sure. So this didn't surprise me at all. But yeah, it's not as nice. It's not as easy as the Xbox solution for sure. And it's just less, Sony did less engineering to make this easier for people than Xbox. It's
less convenient, yeah.
Because they could have taken extra steps to make it a slot on the back. They could have done all that, but this probably saved them, money or design and engineering to just I'll just make it a slot in there, and it won't be proprietary. It'll just be the standard thing that can just go right in. It's a little bit trickier, but yeah, no one wants to do it. I don't want to do it. I'd rather have it just a slot in the back, right?
Do you think the reason is because their focus when engineering the console was on cooling and not on some of those convenience factors of having the expandable being external, or you know what I mean? Maybe that was
Probably.
Their focus.
Yeah. This was probably just something that it was just lower on the list, or they just never thought of it, or didn't prioritize it. And it's not great, but it's doable. It's just going to take a little bit of extra work.
And I want maybe more than two things. I want to clarify some stuff because this has obviously started a flame war in terms of fandom and all that stuff, right? So a couple things. One, with the PlayStation, they're going to be approving all of these things, but it seems like there's going to be quite a bit of options to choose from once they figure out who's approved, right? Two, it's still unclear if any of these will be available at launch. We assume not because Sony hasn't approved any yet. So that's interesting. Three, Xbox's is proprietary, but Jason Ronald, the engineer of the console, recently came out on Twitter and said that they're actually working with other partners to make other, not only sizes, but other manufacturers to not just Seagate. So the assumption there is maybe Seagate struck a partnership with Microsoft to have the first ones available at launch, right? That seems like the assumption. So though they're proprietary, it seems like there will be plenty of options for people moving forward, which is also good, and not just 1 terabyte, but 2 terabyte.
There was one I saw, and it's not officially approved yet, but there was one that supposedly will work with PlayStation, but it was in the other direction. It was a 500 gigabyte, which is an interesting thought. Because to me, I'm like, it's just not worth it, though. You might as well get a terabyte at least, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Xbox will probably have smaller sizes, too, even, which is good to have options, I guess.
The next point I want to make is these will get cheaper over time, because that's just how memory is. So if you think whoa, the $200 price point is a little steep, I'm going to wait, you should, because they will get cheaper. 3, the PlayStation solutions at launch will be just as expensive as Xboxes. Now, because they're not solely proprietary being manufactured into this memory card thing, those prices will probably go down quicker than the Xboxes. But like Ronald said, there's going to be various options, sizes, and manufacturers, which means they're going to be competing for price as well, right? So at the end of the day, the consumer wins. With all that being said, I think it's just a wait-and-see approach in terms of expanding your storage. The one thing we don't know still is how much accessible memory the PlayStation 5 will have, because we already know now that the Xbox Series X will have 800 gigs out of the 1 terabyte, right? I think it's like 820 specifically. With the PlayStation, we know it's 825 gigabytes as the whole SSD, but we still don't know what's usable. The assumption is, okay, probably 600, right? If you do the math, if Xbox is taking up 200 gigs, Sony's is probably going to take up 200 gigs. That hasn't been confirmed yet, so who knows? And in that case, Dom, I could see a case for somebody maybe going for the 500 gig external, because if you're sitting at 600 to get the 500, you go up to a terabyte, and it's like what you would assume or expect out of a next-gen console. So I get wanting to get it, but yeah.
So it was in this particular one that I saw, and it was $150 for the 500 gigabyte expansion, and at that point it's like, just pork over the extra $60 to double it. You know what I mean? But if it's gonna, but $60 is $60. So it could be worth it.
It's like a game, right? Why pay for the more storage when I can use that for a game? Who knows? And lastly, the stand, right? So the stand requires a screwdriver to set up if you're going to stand it vertically. But if you're going to stand it horizontally, what you do is you unscrew the stand, you pop the screw into this holder in the stand itself, and then you clip the stand onto the side of the PlayStation 5 in a really weird way, and then it sits on top of that, because remember, due to the dimensions of this thing, you can't just sit it on its side like the Xbox where you can just tilt it over.
It'll wobble.
And the thing that was surprising me that I guess I never noticed either, Dom, this is me not paying attention, is I didn't know it also needed to stand vertically. I guess I just never paid attention. Because obviously you could tell it needed to stand sideways because it was curved, but I guess I never paid attention. Did it always have the stand on the bottom? Did I just always miss that?
I'm pretty sure, like even in those first reveal trailers, it had it on there. I'm pretty confident.
I guess I just never paid attention. That's on me. The one thing I will say that's a bummer for... Here's the thing. So the PlayStation stand is removable, but you need it in either position. So it's removable to change the orientation, but that's, you know what I mean? You can't just not use it. The Xbox has a stand too that's not removable, and I saw some people complaining about it, but to me, I'm like, I mean, they're both like, you need them both essentially. One that's connected always, and the other one that's not. It would be cool if you could remove the Xbox one, but I wonder if that way they can keep the bottom cooling solution the same as well, and not have to worry about engineering something if people were to pop that off. You know what I mean? Like having that permanent allows them to do some things because they know it's always going to be on the console. So that's probably what I assume is the deal there. Yeah, other than that, they tore the rest of the console apart and, did all that stuff. Wasn't anything else of note to me personally. I don't know if there's anything I didn't mention that you wanted to mention real quick, Dom.
Not really. I mean, they emphasize, it's big so it can be quiet, and there's foam around the Blu-ray drive to make that quieter. The heat
the dust thing. I didn't cover the dust thing.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Do you know about that? Because I just saw headlines about it. I didn't actually read into it.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead then, because this I actually thought was cool if it works how they were describing it. So on PS4, like I did this once where I opened them up and cleaned out all the dust from it, and it was kind of tricky because like all the crap gets into the little fan blades and all around it, and if you really you could really take it all the way apart to truly get all the dust out, and it was it was a bit complicated, and the thing got dusty. For the PS5, they highlighted just taking off one of those flaps revealed these two little, maybe there was 3 or 4 little holes where supposedly like it was the dust catcher was right there, and you could just use a vacuum to suck the dust right out of those holes. And from the sounds of it, it'd be way simpler to get that done. So hopefully that works how they advertise, and it more dust doesn't get into the fan and into the rest of the system because of that. So.
Yeah, and because those panels are so easily like removed, the flaps, it'll make it a dream to get in there if it works the way it's intended, right, and marketed. So that's really cool. It's kind of like the flip of what we were just talking about, where they didn't spend much time on making the memory expansion more accessible for people, but they did spend a lot of time apparently making cleaning the dust out easier for people. Yeah. Which is
whatever.
probably was likely a problem they saw of the PS4 getting too dusty and people not being able to clean it. So they're like, okay, well, if people are going to complain about dusting, let's give them a solution that works, right? So, next up, for all you trophy hunters out there, we got some trophy updates. Both pretty cool, especially if you're really into getting them trophies. So the first one, the trophy level system is going from 1 to 100 to 1 to 999, and there's going to be new icons. And obviously, somebody who's primarily Xbox, doesn't play a lot of PlayStation, or is a trophy hunter, I'm an achievement guy. From what I've seen, the really cool thing about this is that because the levels were just 100 of them, the level scaling was really difficult. And by the time you got to like the 30s and 40s, there was just so little progress being made that it kind of was like a bummer you never saw, that number going up. And with these type of systems and almost anything they're implemented into, leveling systems, you want to have it paced well because it's that sense of accomplishment and getting better at something, right? So from them moving it to 100 levels to 999, the scaling shifts. So you'll be able to move up in levels a lot easier than it was before. And there's various tiers. There's a bronze tier, silver tier, gold tier, and then the platinum tier is when you hit 999. So it's going to let people feel as if they're making progress with their trophies. As somebody who loves getting trophies, Dom, especially in the From games, what does this do for you? Do you like the level change in terms of scaling and everything?
Yeah, it sounds really cool. The level, like for me, I was like, oh yeah, I guess I forgot that there's a level. I'm not sure what level I am because it so seldom changes. So maybe this is what I needed to pay more attention to the actual level. I paid attention to like how many platinums I had because it has a counter for that. But the level I never gave much concern to. So maybe this would be what I need to like emphasize, like, oh, I leveled up again more frequently, right? So this sounds like a cool deal, a good improvement.
And I think it's already gone live because Greg Miller was sharing pictures of it. He went from level 42 to like 510 or something like that. I don't exactly remember what his other level was. But yeah, it's really cool, especially because, like you said, you don't remember what your level is. It's probably partially due to the fact that that number rarely changes too. You know what I mean? So, really cool there. Next up, according to a now removed French PlayStation blog post, trophy progress is coming in the revised trophy system update for the PlayStation 5. This is really cool. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Dom. I could have sworn that both the PlayStation and Xbox had this during their like initial pitch for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 is something that we'd be getting. Is progress. You can see the progress of trophies and achievements, right? The Xbox had it for the entire generation. It's a really cool feature and it helps with achievement hunting. And PlayStation never got it, and now it's getting it, which is really cool. Am I wrong in remembering that they talked about this being a thing for PlayStation 4?
I don't know. Maybe. It obviously never happened if they did promise it. So I don't know. But yeah, this is cool. I'm looking forward to this because I mean, it's first supported games, but at least in this sense, like Xbox kind of paved the way. So probably developers already know how to do this, and a lot of them can implement it in new games going forward.
Yeah, I want to see some type of change to the achievement system for the Xbox Series X. Doesn't need to be anything drastic, but I do wish there was a marker that indicated a completion for a game, right? Because for PlayStation, you have the Platinum Trophy. For Xbox, all you can say is that you got 1,000 out of 1,000, you perfected it, right? But there's no indication of like X amount of completed games. And I would hope that they would add something like that, whatever that symbol or icon would be. I would like to have a tangible, like, whatever that is. I don't even know what they would call it. But I would hope that they would add that to the system because we've seen over the years that PlayStation has done stuff with trophies that Xbox has then implemented, and Xbox has done things that then PlayStation has implemented. I mean, we don't even have trophies without achievements. You know what I mean? So that's really cool. I just like that they're learning off of one another, and I hope that achievements see some type of evolution as well. And I'm assuming it was removed because it was just too early, and it was probably going to be a surprise near launch for people. Probably like a blog post on the official PlayStation blog post, not some French one, but cool either way. That's it for the news this week. Not a whole lot going on. Obviously, there was some stuff with the Xbox thing that seemed hyperbolic and mixed reports of heat. And from what I understood, it's like people didn't understand that a console is going to expel heat. They just assumed that these cooling systems would mean that they wouldn't expel heat, which then got misconstrued into clickbait headlines of the console running hot, which isn't even what's happening. And yeah, it was just a big old jumbled mess of garbage. which then obviously fandom Twitter took over and ran with it, no matter what side you fell on. But that's that. It's time for Chapter 3 of Tell Me Why Video Game Book Club. This chapter was called Inheritance, which is pretty indicative of what the theme of this was, which was finding out more about Marianne and who the twins' father was. We started off with Allison's nightmare. She has tons of guilt over killing Marianne, right? She's tossing and turning in bed, having these crazy nightmares. And at this point, you start realizing that this is a memory thing, right, Dom? Of like, okay, she's like partially schizophrenic. Her memories aren't exactly memories. They're just her thoughts, right? Her thoughts coming to life, which isn't as reliable as an actual memory. So opening up this chapter, we closed the last one with her hearing the mom say to their father, "I'm going to kill you," which then we realized was misconstrued into her telling Tyler that, or Ollie at the time. What did this do for you in terms of, oh yeah, we were right about that. This is exactly where things were going.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it. That whole sequence, I was just, I felt so bad for her, right? Especially as stuff like kind of came to life through other characters. And she later admits, like, yeah, it's everything bad I've thought about myself, but being shouted at me by other people, which is like absolutely terrifying. And I really felt that.
Yeah.
I was just like, I just felt so bad for her. It was very effective in conveying emotion, for sure.
I mean, we're often our own worst enemies, right? Like, the worst thing about humans is that we'll often tell ourselves things we'd never utter to another human being, right?
Yeah.
We're so mean on ourselves. And she kind of manifested that into these things she thought was memories, but was really just, the manifestation of the darkest parts of herself. We then see that Allison stayed the night over at Eddie's because of the fight that her and Tyler had, where she just couldn't go through with figuring out more about Marianne. And she went to go stay at her old room at Eddie's house. In the room, I don't know if because obviously the thing would Tell Me Why that we've talked about multiple times is you can explore to your heart's content. You can get as much or as little from the stories you want. And you find out that she actually wrote Tyler a bunch of letters and kept them and never sent them to him. And it was partially out of guilt, which you understand with their relationship. Tyler just wanted her to contact him more. You know what I mean? So that was kind of heartbreaking as well. Of like, she did go through the effort of writing them. She just couldn't bring herself to send him, which really sucks. You explore the house. You find out a bunch of stuff. You find out that, like, Eddie's got some number from a girl at a bar or something. It's like written on a little ripped piece of paper. Yeah. You explore the house. You learn some stuff about Allison as well as Eddie. And then it comes to a point where Tom and Michael greet her at the door, and Tessa wasn't there. At least for me. I don't know. Was Tessa there for you?
No.
No, okay. I didn't know if this was one of those things based on our previous choices, if she would have been there or not. But they greet her, and you realize that she's, she got fired, essentially. When she starts talking to Michael, you realize that she's no longer going to be working there. And I wrote down here, because obviously I'm going over my notes, I put Michael continues to be A+. Just a solid dude. Like, he shows up, he talks to Allison, he's just the best friend you could ask for. Just a rock solid guy. Well, obviously at the end of this we'll talk about the characters and what they meant to us, but Michael's easily my favorite supporting character. Like, dude is just phenomenal. Next up, Allison has a breakdown, which is kind of scary. This kind of caught me off guard. I mean, we were leading up to it because she was getting those flashes of her deepest, darkest thoughts, but when the breakdown actually happened, how did you respond to that, Don?
So, like, yeah, Michael was with her, and I it gave me the option basically to just kind of like bottle up or like can like kind of open up to Michael.
This is the decision, right? Tell Michael about the memories, yes or no?
Yeah. This was another one. This is one of those choices that I don't like in these types of games because obviously, like, from what we know about Michael, like you said, he seems really cool. There could be more to him. We don't know necessarily how close they are, but like he seems like a great guy and they seem close enough. And in my head, I'm like, she should tell him. That is what's best for her, right? Would she? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not. I don't know. So then it had me going back and forth. Like, I think she should. So I'm going to say yes, open up to him. Even if that's not necessarily what I would think is the most realistic response from her. But nonetheless, I said yeah. And I told him all about what she had going on. And he was very supportive and helpful without doing that annoying, like, toxic positivity shit, or like kind of like brushing it off.
He was listening. He was there to be an open ear. Yeah,
exactly. Without like like saying like trying to say that he has the answers, or this is deflecting or anything weird. Like he was very like a very good listener, like you just said. So that's how that went in my playthrough.
I agreed with you. I told him about the memories. Some notes I made here, which we already talked about, that they were manifested thoughts, not entirely memories. We find out that Ellie had panic attacks after Marianne's death, which is something we didn't know about. We knew that she had some stuff going on psychologically, but this is where she confirmed she had panic. Like, it's an ongoing thing, these panic attacks, right? It's not out of the blue that she's dealt with these. And then another line that I caught that I don't know if you caught, Michael attempted suicide in 2011.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So in that conversation, he talks about, like, yeah, if I was successful in 2011, I wouldn't even be here talking to you. Like,
yeah.
Which is pretty eye-opening, which is sadly not too uncommon for people in the LGBTQ plus community because of the things they have to deal with from family and friends, you know what I mean, of just trying to be themselves.
Additionally, a weird statistic, it's been a couple years, but it's Alaska. A lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the highest, the states with the highest suicide rates because people are much more isolated there, is what I understand. But yeah.
On top of the day-night cycle being totally screwed too.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So this is where Michael asks you if you want him to go talk to Tyler or not. Like, you can choose if, like, hey, yeah, go talk to Tyler at the house or not. I chose to, because I was like, yeah, of course, if I want anybody to kind of reconcile things between me and Tyler, I'd want it to be Michael. Did you choose to say yes or no?
Yeah, I was with you here too, because Allison and Tyler had obviously ended on a fight, and we're upset with each other. So it seemed like having Michael go first to see Tyler would be a good primer to get them to make up, basically.
Next up, we cut to the police station because Allison went to go visit Eddie. I've liked Eddie for the most part through this game. This is where I kind of had an issue with him. He mentions that she hadn't had an attack in a while, meaning a panic attack, right? And this is where it kind of lends to her having these throughout her life since the Marianne thing. And then he hints at Marianne experiencing something awful. And this is kind of throwing off the green light in my mind of the thing we talked about of the sexual assault or what exactly happened, right? Like, he knew something bad happened to her. He didn't know. And this is where he kind of, like, is like, let Tyler be. You have to worry about your own life, which I totally understand from a parent's perspective of, like, he's much closer to Allison than he is to Tyler. So he's going to be like, you need to do what's in the best interest of your life. But at the same time, as somebody playing from the outside, knowing both these characters, I'm like, dude, fuck off. They're twins. They're siblings. Let them go through what they need to go through. It's none of your business. You know what I mean? So this is where Eddie lost me a little bit. I still overall enjoyed what he brought to the narrative, and I don't think what he did here was unrealistic, and that's why it was kind of frustrating to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. It made sense. Like, it seemed like, yeah, I was kind of like, yeah, I could see this guy being like this. I was with you. I wasn't really thrilled about his reaction either, and yeah, he was kind of dismissive of Tyler. But I get it. It seemed realistic, even though I was a bit disappointed too.
I was like, eh. Then we travel to the docks, which is visually one of my favorite locations. I mean, a lot of these locations in this game are so damn beautiful because it is Alaska. Like, just some of the skyboxes they have and the exterior. Oh, it's so beautiful.
Dude, everything at the house, when you look out on the lake, and the mountain behind the lake is like crazy.
I want to see that on the Series X, like in full HDR and everything. Oh my god. So we go to the docks and we're going to be confronting Sam, and Allison's going to be asking him, because we didn't mention this, she has a conversation with Eddie about who their dad is, and she mentions Sam, is Sam our dad? And Eddie's like, well, him and Marianne were close, but I don't know if he was your dad, but you can ask him. And then obviously she goes over there and talks to him, and you do a couple little puzzles to help him fix the boat or whatever. And then she straight up just asks him, she's like, Sam, are you our dad? I thought it was going to be a lot more, but she's like, see, at this point she seems pissed and she just wants to know. And he basically says, I'm not your dad, but I wish I was, which I thought was one of the most heartbreaking lines and that's not because he cares for Allison and Tyler, but he so much so is in love with Marianne. You know what I mean? And that's part of it, of like a man being in love with a woman and knowing that she had kids with somebody else. Like, he wishes he could have been the father to her kids, kind of thing, you know? It's like, oh man.
Yeah. Especially when you learn about, like, the real dad. And at this point we knew, like, they were abandoned by their real dad at least, right? So,
yeah.
And Sam did some stuff to try to take care of them, right? But yeah, seeing him was like really, it's really like tough because he's brutally like alcoholic, and he's just like reaching for these empty bottles, trying to get another sip of something while you're trying to talk to him, and it was kind of hard to watch.
And then you see the note from his cousin saying like, "Hey, you're either gonna fix my boat or I'm gonna say that you stole it," and it's like he's just a town drunk now, which is unfortunate because that's one of those tough things is when you see a town drunk, I think our immediate reaction is, oh, that person doesn't have their life together. What are they doing? They're so awful. But then when you see the human side of it is like, when this guy, before the whole thing with Marianne, this guy was like over there all the time helping her. Even when she didn't want to see him, he was going out of his way to make sure her car was running so she didn't have any issues. Like, he cared for her so much, but it was that broken heart that kind of tore down his entire life. And then, oh man.
And his marriage, because he was married and no longer is, probably because of Marianne, right? So
yeah, you see the note from his son of like, here's $150, Dad. I heard you were, Mom said you didn't have a whole lot of money. Help yourself out with this. I was like, oh, it's awful. Really well written and like realistic characters, just terrible to go through. And then at the end of the conversation with him, you have a choice with Allison of what to tell him, and I chose the you have to let go of Marianne already option. Which I don't remember what the other option was.
Yeah. I think it was just about, I think it was similar. It was just like the severity of which you told him that. Because I think
one was just to stop drinking, and the other one was specifically, you got to let go of Marianne. It was something like that.
Yeah, I think I chose like the softer option too, of like understanding how he was feeling, but trying to help him get past it because it was obviously over. Instead of just calling him out and being like, get your shit together. Going with a little softer side. I did too.
In that moment, I felt like if Allison was ballsy enough to ask him straight up, "Are you our dad?" I would figure that she would be like, "You got to let go of Marianne already, dude. Like, you just got to,
Yeah, I thought that was really cool though. So like when you first get there and you're helping him out, and you're trying to like start up that conversation to get to the point to ask him that question, and he keeps on like trying to say like, "I'm busy. I'm fixing this. Like, can we do this later? Like, I don't got time." And then she, like Allison, is like hesitant to like just ask him for a while, for a few minutes, and then finally she just says fuck it, and just like you said, gets real ballsy and asks him like, "Are you my dad?" Like just straight up, and he's like, "Oh, we're having this conversation."
So, and this scene leads to the reveal of the attic in the barn. If you remember from last podcast, I had mentioned if you do the post credits scene, they talk about this attic area, and I thought it was in the house. Turns out it was in the barn. And he's like, yeah, I helped her build it. She never told anyone about it. It's right above the barn. And he gives them a picture of him building it, and you see where the handle is to open it up. So then from that point, we cut to Tyler at the house, because this whole time he's been at the house to himself since Allison and him had that fight. And Michael comes up, and he asks him, how are you doing? Yada, yada, yada. You want to fish for a bit? Because earlier we found out that Michael was, like, he loved fishing, right? He had his own personal fishing spot and everything. So they go out to the lake in front of the house, or in back of the house technically, and they start fishing. And this
ice
is where
fishing in November.
Ice fishing, yeah. Which you do a little bit of ice fishing in a mini game. You get a trophy or an achievement if you catch all 3 fish, which I did. I'm hoping or assuming you did. Yeah, they're a really neat little mini game. And those are just the type of things these type of games add in to give you some sense of gameplay. But you have this conversation with Michael, just talking about his relationship with Allison, what they need to do, should they move on, yada, yada, yada. Then they kind of start talking about and debating the Juneau Coalition of Equality, this center in Juneau where, Michael got a lot of help from, and he talks about how it like kind of saved his life and was part of the chosen family conversation. And he says that when they do go to Juneau, if Tyler decides to go with them, that he should check it out, right? And this is something that comes back full circle later, but this is just like kind of the seeding of that. And then the big decision at the end. Well, it's 2 different decisions. One, you decide if you want to romantically pursue something with Michael, right? Like how you want to play it. And then secondly, at the very end, you decide if you want to kiss him or not. I went full bore. I went fully romantic. I went fully kiss him. What did you do?
I did too. It felt like a good moment. Like they were enjoying fishing together, and I don't know.
Yeah, right. I love their connection because Michael is somebody who dealt with stuff, even though he's such a positive person. He kind of knows a lot of the stuff that Tyler's dealing with, not in the same aspect, you know what I mean? But they just seem good for one another. And I like the line where he's like, yeah, I have to be good to you, or else Allison's going to beat me up or whatever he said.
Oh, yeah.
That was really funny, too. So then this leads to the twins rekindling, right? We have the scene where Allison and Tyler come together, and we got to do what's in the best interest of us. And I'm sorry I didn't mean to say anything. And they have that whole thing, and then they talk about the loft. Allison presents a picture. Hey, there's this loft. We need to check it out. And this is where all of the revelations of the story unfold. Most of them, anyways. So we're gonna go through these. First up, we find out that she was pregnant in 1992, which you're like, yeah, she had twins. Of course, she was pregnant at some point. This was before the twins were born and before she got pregnant with the twins. So it's like, oh, does she have another kid? Do we have an older sibling? And at this point, Dom, I don't know if you felt this way. I'm like, do we have a secret sibling we've been talking to that neither of us know that we're related? Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, and they even mention it in the dialogue, like, do we have a sibling out there in the world? And they're like, I don't know, maybe he didn't make it, or who knows, or she gave him up, who knows?
The lunatic part of my brain was like, is Michael our sibling? How awful would that be if Tyler just kissed Michael and you find out it's like some Star Wars stuff right there?
This isn't A New Hope.
Yeah. And then you find out that the lost treasure, right, that you often hear in these stories was the baby. And she actually lost the baby to a miscarriage, which is awful. Not to get too serious, but like in my close family, we've experienced a miscarriage. And it just is an emotional nightmare for people. Like, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's a very terrible thing to go through. And from what we read at the Marianne, she didn't even seem to have that significant other to go through it with. It was kind of on her own that she went through miscarriage. And this happened in Alaska. She had already moved to Alaska to start a new life. So you talk about the isolation and the suicide rate. It's like compounding with miscarriage, being all alone, and it's awful.
And after you learn about like her childhood and how she ended up in Alaska alone, because it kind of goes into a lot of detail when you're reading all those letters of like she was really well off growing up and was in a ballet and like was initially going to college for like engineering or something, more scientific, and then changed her major to some kind of art,
visual arts, and then eventually ended up dropping out entirely. You read a letter from her old boyfriend, or we assume, or whatever, that like had gotten her pregnant. And then the worst though was like because her parents were like furious with her that she was pregnant before being married, and that she decided to leave. But like that letter from her dad was just like, oh man, we haven't talked to you in 4 years, we hope you're doing well.
Simultaneously like letting her know that her mother had just died, but then also telling her like, screw you because you didn't show up and because you left and this is your fault. Just putting like the majority of the blame of her mother dying on her leaving. It was just like, I was just sitting there like reading text on the TV and like I was like, this is shitty, dude. This is just awful. There's a lot.
It was a lot to take in. And then we kind of put two and two together. This is why she was so protective of the twins, is because she had already lost a kid, and that's why she so much so wanted to protect them from the world outside. We find out the kid's name is Leo, the baby that passed away, through the puzzle of putting his name into the treasure box. Leo Ronan, which by the way, they have one of the coolest last names.
Oh,
Ronan is such a dope last name.
Yeah.
In the letter we find in that treasure box, you realize that she called Tyler Ollie, which is pretty huge in and of itself. Of like, he even says, he's like, oh, she knew, like she wrote this knowing that he didn't want to be called whatever his original name was, that he was Ollie at this point. And I thought that was really cool because that lends to the book that she had and all this stuff of like, no, she wasn't so hateful and transphobic. It was just these weird misconceptions from a kid's perspective. And this kind of goes to it too of, she knew he was Ollie and wanted to be called that, which I thought was really cool. Mm-hmm. Through all these puzzles too, we find out that, and a lot of the stuff we'll find out why things change. At one point, Marianne and Tessa were business partners together. They were going to open up a business together. There was like a business draft that Tessa had put together for them. And you're like, wow, their relationship got so bad. What happened? Why did they not do this business together? Because, one of the big things for Marianne was not having the financial security. We talked about Eddie's mom last episode, and you were like, Eddie's mom? They mentioned Eddie's mom? Like, what exactly? You end up finding out here that Marianne took care of Eddie's mom when she was dying in her last days. And she even tells her, like, I understand you have 2 kids to take care of. I don't want to put such a burden on you. But please let Eddie know I love him. You know what I mean? And yada, yada, yada. And, Yeah, that was pretty tough too, because it makes everything so complex. Of like, the reason Eddie was so good to Allison and Tyler, because he paid for
Yeah.
the fireweed, is because Marianne went out of her way to care for his mom. You know what I mean?
Kind of comes full circle a little bit there to
Yeah.
explain that.
Then this is where we get the bombshell. We find out because they go to the pier and they try to see who the person was talking on the dock to their mom, and it's Tom Wyche, Tom, the owner of the store, Tessa's husband. This was crazy. This isn't something I saw coming. I didn't even think about it. He was the Dark Hunter, but there was so much foreshadowing if we look back. Who's somebody who seems like they're giving off the fakest smile or like the fakest sense of positivity the entire game? Tom, right? And the hunter always has this large, creepy smile on his face, right? The moment we meet Tom, he's at the desk at the front of the store surrounded by guns and other wildlife hunting stuff. So it's like, okay, no wonder the kids would associate him as the hunter because he had these guns and he was a hunter himself and all that stuff, right? There's so much foreshadowing in this game that we didn't even pick up on, or at least I didn't. Explains the Tessa relationship, right? Of like her being so angry towards Marianne. When they get into the conversation with Tom when he drives to the house, he acts as if Tessa doesn't know, and everyone's like, yo, dude, Tessa's known for a long time. Like, why do you think she had such a riff with Marianne? And he's so oblivious of like, how could that be? Yada, yada, yada. And then the heartbreaking thing is you realize that all he cares about is his election, and that's the only reason he doesn't want this information getting out. But he presents a memory of what happened that night, and it's interesting because part of you doesn't want to believe him because he is such a reckless rat of a human being that's like, oh, I panicked, I couldn't do anything whenever any sort of danger happens where he could interject and help people. But then part of it is like based on the lackluster confirmation of how accurate the memories are, like maybe he was partially right. So you have this conversation with Tom about him being the dad and just being an absolutely terrible human. And then it eventually, and if you want to speak on that before you get to the part I'm going to ask you about, feel free. They go down to the dock, and it's there where Allison decides, was Tom's memory correct, where Marianne was pleading that she loved her kids and she wasn't going to hurt them, or was Tyler's memory correct, where she was threatening Tyler's life? Go ahead.
So, yeah, like you said, it was a bit of a shock, but then as I kind of take inventory of like, wait, I mean, we already asked Sam if he was the father, and I never really thought he was to begin with, and he said no. And then like you start taking inventory of like, oh, there's no other male characters in the game, and they're not gonna. You knew the father was gonna get revealed, but it wasn't gonna be a stranger. It wasn't gonna be a new character at this point. It was gonna be someone we've already met in the game. Tom was the only one left, so I was kind of like, I should have seen that coming. And in addition to the foreshadowing that you mentioned, but it was a good reveal as it slowly panned up to see his face, and you're like, oh yeah, of course it's this douchebag. And that then it starts to make a lot of sense with everything with Tessa and so on, like you said. But yeah, that final decision as they go back after they're down at the dock or after Tom presented his view of what happened, and they kind of present it to you like they start questioning. Even Tyler's like, I don't really remember exactly how it happened. But then Tyler says to Allison, like, you have to choose, what happened, basically. Like, what is the accurate memory to you? And then live your life with that, whatever it is. Don't flounder anymore, but just choose. And then obviously you get to literally choose as a player. So the way it was presented to me, I was like, well, I'm going to choose the way that they initially thought. And that it was, she did say, I'm going to kill you. Because to me, that was, I don't want to say like it was just the easier choice, but it just seemed like the right choice. And I didn't really trust Tom, and I think maybe what he was revealing was more like, I know that Allison killed her, not necessarily what Marianne had said or didn't say. So yeah, it was an interesting choice they gave you, but I went with Allison's original memory that Marianne had said, I am going to kill you, because that to me, like, I don't know, it just made more sense. And even if it wasn't what she said, like, she was still like chasing Tyler to the end of a dock with a double barrel shotgun. So like, to me, it doesn't necessarily matter what she was saying. It was still threatening. And I didn't think it was right that Allison should feel guilty for what she did.
Yeah, it's because I love that we can interpret it differently. Because for me, it was so much an easy decision to pick Tom's because I think it was partially the way the writers were trying to trick us into like, oh yeah, of course you're not going to pick Tom's. He's a jackass. Why would you pick his memory, his thoughts of the events? Because and I think that leans towards the players picking Tyler's original memory. But for me, I'm like reading all this stuff about Marianne and everything she went through. I just couldn't click the memory that had her be so aggressive towards the kids because that wasn't the Marianne I learned to know.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, oh, it's an easy decision. I'm going to pick the one where she approached and the kids were confused and panicked. And then this leads to us finding out that, yeah, she was going to commit suicide. She was going to blow her brains out with a shotgun. And that's a little crazy to say it that way. But like she was that night she was set to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the awful thing. She didn't expect the kids to wake up. And you find out that the whole situation in the attic was set up for them to find. And it's the whole reason she read them that final bedtime story that night when she tucked him in was because it was kind of saying goodbye to the princess, which she was. It's just awful. And that kind of ends that. They come to terms with that. But then we get a time jump, which is always some of my favorite stuff. We get a 6-month time jump, and this is some of the stuff we learn through Tyler cleaning out the house for the final time and saying goodbye to it. And I wrote down all of them because I thought they were all really cool revelations. So first up, Tyler shaved his head. He no longer has the wavy alternative punk emo hair going on. He just completely shaved his head, which he looked pretty good with. I honestly like the shaved head look more than his wavy hair personally. But yeah, it looked pretty cool. What did you think about the shaved head? Surprising? Not a fan? Not a fan.
No, he should have kept the lettuce, dude.
Next up, Tom lost his election. Yeah, fuck that dude.
Yeah. And Tessa left him, thank God.
Yeah, Tessa left him and he lost the election. Everything's good. Everything's turning up Millhouse. Next up, Tyler's getting top surgery in a month, which is really cool. He mentions that on the phone when he's talking to Allison about moving to Juneau. Allison is seeing a therapist, which is really healthy. And I think all people should at least see a therapist once and see if it's something that works for them in their life. Having an outside source to deal with your problems that has no reliance on your life or your decisions is really healthy. And I think everyone should see a therapist at least once and figure out if it's right for you. So I thought that was really cool. Next up, there was a goodbye note from Sam, which is kind of heartbreaking. He was like, I know I'm not the best person. I couldn't be the best person to you guys. I just have a lot of issues going on, but I wish you guys the best. I'm like, this dude's going to probably die of alcoholism or something. One thing we didn't mention, too, is when you were talking to him in the docks, he had a court date for a DUI, which I could just imagine that dude dying to a DUI, too, which is sad. That was heartbreaking as well. Next up, this is when if you check the car. Did you manage to check the car before you close the door?
Yeah, but all that was in it was another statue, I think.
Yeah, but you actually see the flyer for the JCE, the Juneau Coalition for Equality, which is the thing that him and Michael talked about when they were fishing, and they got a flyer for some I think it was like gay dance event, or it's called something. It was like a gay event happening at it, which is really cool. And there's a note from Denise, who was the receptionist at the police station, and she was like, "This is what I was talking about, D." I thought that was really cool. I think it's like a picture of him and Michael kissing too, like on a photograph. And then in the car as well, Dom, there's a Master Chief papercraft on the dash.
Oh, okay, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, dude. So I was looking through the car. I was like, is there anything else I need to see? And there's a really cool little Master Chief papercraft on the dashboard, which is awesome. If you guys didn't know, this is an Xbox exclusive. So it's nice to see a little hint of that. And yeah, it was just really cool. I was like, oh, cool, Master Chief, little Master Chief. Which I thought was dope. So if this is, I guess we'll get to that. I was gonna say something, but we'll get to that at the end. Tyler's final monologue talks about grief, how it goes in cycles, right? And this is when he leaves a message for one of his friends that he met at Fireweed, and he talks about, you told me about grief, and it is exactly what it is, and I've learned to, move past that. And if you ever want to talk, let me know. Because Tyler very much separated his regular life from his Fireweed life, and then, once he got to Fireweed, he kind of cut off his past life, and then he left. Once he left Fireweed, he kind of cut them off too. He's very like focusing on the life he was living instead of the life he had led, and kind of burning some bridges.
That was something he mentioned to Michael when they were fishing. Was that because Michael asked about people at Firewood, and Tyler said, yeah, some of them are really cool people, but I'm done with them. Just kind of because, like you said, he just decided to just move on and be done with that entirely. So yeah, it was nice to see him having contacted, I forget the guy's name, Aaron or something.
And the game ends with info on the suicide prevention hotline, which is obviously very important, that if you're ever experiencing anything like this, or you know somebody who's experiencing stuff, to get on that hotline and call. You can save a life. So it was really important. Before we give our final wrap-up thoughts, Dom, I wanted to ask you real quick. Are you planning to go back and clean up all of the trophies and everything? No? I think I will go clean up the achievements. These games are usually very easy to get, clean them up and get the stuff. And part of me wants a reason to go back and look at some of the scenes and see if I can notice stuff retroactively now that I know the twist at the end of like, oh, there were some more hints while I'm cleaning up the achievements. That might be a good time. What else? I think that's it. Let's talk about wrap-up thoughts. For me, it met my expectations. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't as supernatural as I thought it was going to be. There was moments that were much more horror-inducing than I thought. They weren't like overtly scary, but I was like, oh, this is real creepy. I loved, because this isn't something I knew based on the marketing, the whole fairy tale storytelling aspect of the book, and how Marianne told her story through that. I didn't know anything about that going in. I thought that was really well done. As a non-trans man myself, I thought they handled that stuff really well, but who knows? Based on my perspective, it seemed like they handled it well. And overall, I had a good time. I thought the pacing was really good. I thought 3 episodes was really well, too. It didn't overstay its welcome. And they actually kind of felt like they got shorter. The first one was definitely the longest. That one was like 4 hours. And the other two were between 2.5 to 3 hours. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, it fit the story, right? So if there's a different narrative, maybe that is 3 to 5 episodes, maybe that feels better. But for this story specifically, for Tell Me Why, I really enjoyed it. And I'm thankful for playing it. And I really enjoyed doing this video game book club with you.
Yeah, no, this was cool. I really enjoyed this game too. Like you said, the pacing was really good. And the way the story progressed, it all just made sense, and it just kind of flowed so naturally. And then the story itself was very different than anything like I typically consume. And I learned a lot, and like it's just another like great story that like helps you understand different people's perspectives who you might not have considered before. And hopefully be like a little, less ignorant, more understanding of certain things. And then and a lot of different things, right? Be it how we pictured Marianne from the beginning of the game to the end, and Sam and Allison and obviously Tyler. Like it was just, all the characters are really, really well done, and it really like makes you feel different things about them, and understand them really well. I guess like the animations sometimes, especially the facial animations, were like janky, which kind of is like doesn't, and especially like there's one scene where as Allison, I told Eddie the truth about like Allison was the one that killed Marianne, right? Which didn't have much impact on the story actually, as I thought it might have. But anyway, his reaction. They always knew
she killed her. But they thought it was in self-defense.
Well, they thought Tyler did it. Eddie did.
No. They always thought Allison did because she took the rap for him. Oh, no, never mind. Sorry. I'm completely misconstruing. Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, because it gives you the option, just as Allison, to can tell that to Eddie finally after like a decade or whatever, which is kind of crazy to think that Eddie never knew and she lived with him and all, But anyway, his facial expression afterward was so goofy looking, because like that's a bombshell of a piece of information, and that the voice acting is super, super good. And so sometimes when it doesn't quite line up with, I don't even really think of it as a negative though. It was just like, it's fine. It didn't actually
like that
take
awkward
me out of it.
Charm to it, I guess, partially.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things with budget too, right? Of like, obviously this game isn't gonna have a crazy budget, and like I would rather have the animation be funky sometimes, but the writing and performance be great than the other way around, right? Where okay, the animation's perfect, but what they're saying I could give two shits about.
Yeah, for sure. And it like I said, I don't even know why I pointed it out, because it didn't even actually like take me out of it at all, because like we mentioned the writing, but yeah, the performances all around in this were super good. So even though like I brought up like Eddie's goofy looking face, the voice behind it was super good, and the writing of what he said after was just like spot on, and how he took it and everything. So, yeah, man, and like this was just a great like a great mystery story too. I appreciated all of that, like a big reveal at the end of how it all went down and who was who and all that kind of stuff. And like you mentioned, a lot of the locations were really cool. Like I enjoyed like just the this town they were in, like the vibe of it reminded me a lot of Alan Wake. Different kind of game, but it had that small town, like weird, isolated kind of feel to the locations. And that stuff just kind of gets me a little bit. So I overall, this game was absolutely excellent. So I'm definitely glad that we went through this.
I recommend it to anyone who likes the Telltale type games or any of these like narrative driven things. Like it just really hit the nail on the head for what it was trying to do. Makes you want to visit Alaska, I'll tell you that much. The other thing I want to give them credit for is I think all of the internal like indoors environments felt very realistic. Like I thought the police station was very well designed. I thought Eddie's house was very well designed. Like all of the rooms and stuff feel lived, like they feel like normal human rooms. Like they don't feel like set up in a video game. I thought, and that's kind of a hard thing to pull off too naturally to make it feel like a real room. I mean, Naughty Dog's often credited for doing this really well as well, of it just feeling like a natural living home. So they did a good job with that. That's it for Tell Me Why Video Game Book Club. Who knows, whenever the next Telltale game like this comes out that we're both interested in, we'll probably do one again. I would love for Microsoft to partner with them and, you know, have these games come out, you know, biannually, however long it takes them to develop these, because there are smaller projects, you know. It's really enjoyable. I definitely want to get back to Life is Strange 2 because I never finished it. I played the first episode, and then the problem is the monthly release dates, right? That's another thing I want to give props to Tell Me Why for. Week after week, we would have actually done this every week it released if we didn't have issues ourselves with scheduling. That was the plan initially, and we loved that because it's like, oh yeah, we got to play all of these in a really orderly fashion. I have to wait months in between, you know? So
yeah, so like you got to assume that the whole game was done. Every chapter was done, and they just intentionally released it in 3 parts, which way better than like that Telltale approach where you assume that in between each one they were just crunching to get that chapter out the door, which didn't
crossing the finish line on the final day possible. And it's cool because it's like, you know, television shows of like, yeah, some video games are binge worthy where you can, you know, Cyberpunk you can run through 40 hours immediately if you want to, but then other episodes release weekly, right? And that's how this is like, yeah, every Saturday or whatever it was, there's a new episode of Tell Me Why. So really cool stuff. Thank you, Dom, for joining me on this. We'll catch you guys next week with, you know, our regular podcasting, talk about what we've been playing normally, and we'll see if there's any other big news. Maybe PlayStation gives, you know, journalists hands-on with the PlayStation 5, or maybe the Xbox. We don't know what else is under embargo, right? I mean, we know everything that hasn't been talked about, but we don't know when those embargoes lift. So could be next week that those embargoes lift on other stuff outside of quick resume and backwards compatibility and all that stuff. So we'll catch you guys next week in episode 210. If you can, please listen to us on iTunes. Leave us a review. We're also on Spotify. On YouTube, you can search Controlled Interest. We'll pop right up. Like the video if you enjoy the podcast. Leave us a comment. I try to read every one. If you want to go over to Twitter, you can follow us collectively at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interest abbreviated. You can follow Dom at DomZorios. You can follow me at Jerrad_. We'll be back next week talking about all things next gen as we head towards the finish line of these new consoles coming out. We'll see you guys then. Bye.